So our next reader is Penelope Flynn.
Hi.
Penelope writes and illustrates adult-targeted horror, suspense, science fiction, and fantasy. Her works have been in several anthologies, and the third book of her Chronicles of Renfields series launches in September 2021. Penelope, over to you.
Thank you. In Bram Stoker's Dracula, there's a character named R.M.S. Renfield. As an inmate in an asylum, he was determined to be zoophagous, manic, a henchman to the Count Dracula, and of course, a madman. But what if he wasn't mad at all? Maybe this was his job. The Chronicles of Renfields posits, what if RMS wasn't alone, but was a member of Renfields, an ancient international clan of vampire-human hybrids who functioned to take care of and maintain those that Renfields referred to as revenants, and what humankind refers to as vampires. The story places us in 1928, the height of the Jazz Age. Ramona is head of Renfield's Investigation and Enforcement Division. She's hunting on behalf of their client, the mayor of New York City, tracking down some out-of-control orphan vampires who have been making the native humans, who Renfields referred to as paradoxans, disappear. Ramona landed noiselessly on the pavement from her 8-story drop, a mere 3 feet behind the revelers. She adjusted her senses to their closeness and followed behind them in the shadows. She was close enough to hear the conversation as if she were one of their party, listening as the orphan guide goaded his followers on. Thousands of people walk the streets of New York daily, but only a very special few know of this place, he said. The group of young men and women tittered in excitement. Just around the block and down the stairs is the most provocative club in the city. I'm sure you've heard of it, he whispered. It's called Orpheus. Ramona's mouth fell open in shock and insult. Orpheus was the name of Renfield International's top-rated club and speakeasy. Though certainly located in Manhattan, it was nowhere near the dingy location he had herded them to. It hurt her heart to think that these fraudsters had been invoking the name of Renfield to lure unsuspecting tourists and some foolhardy, adventurous locals to their deaths. The Paradoxan Authority would certainly have a field day with this, she thought angrily, just giving them one more reason to impose restrictions on Renfield businesses in the city. With speed invisible to the Paradoxan eye, she rushed past the would-be clubbers, stopping between the stairwell and their guide. When they were able to perceive her suddenly standing at the top of the stairway, the group halted in surprise. "Who the hell are you?" the guide growled. "I'm taken aback that you don't know," she replied, stalling. "So, you're her," he said with a dismissive grin. "Well, this confrontation was to be expected sooner or later." "Who is this?" members of his group began to demand angrily. "She's not New York police. She's not even a man." Ramona flashed her badge. "I represent a private security concern, Renfield International Investigations and Enforcement Division." As she spoke, a few of the revelers began stepping backward, inching out of the alleyway. These were apparently locals who understood the wide jurisdiction and power that Renfields held in the city, those who realized that death or injury at the hands of a Renfield officer would never be prosecuted or remedied. However, the others, the tourists, or otherwise uninformed, were unfazed and continued to gripe. The young man, who was their leader and guide, smirked. In the short span of time marking the duration of their confrontation, his hands had already begun to show evidence of his orphan heritage. He was in the process of shifting. His previously manicured nails had sprouted sharp talons, then faster than his paradoxal followers could perceive, he grabbed the wrist of the young man nearest him and with exacting precision sliced his palm open. The remainder of the group groaned and shrieked, watching in horror as blood poured from the gash onto the pavement. Then everyone's attention shifted when almost simultaneously the door at the foot of the stairs crashed open. Ramona furrowed her brow. The little bastard had performed the equivalent of ringing a dinner bell, and it would be seconds before the orphans below scurried to the street level, anxious to gorge themselves on the buffet that the young monster had delivered to their doorstep. He had been very clever in taking the opportunity to catch her in the path between the ravenous predators and their unwitting prey. She glared at the grinning guide. This man-child, could not have been more than 16, maybe 17 years of age, when he was taken, trapped in a near timeless post-pubescent beauty. She felt a flurry of emotions: shock, sadness, anger. The revenant that was his sire or dame, the negligent fool that did this to him, was most likely transfixed by his beauty as much as she was. Many revenant orphans shifted their features to appear more attractive, to lure their prey, but this was no shift. She could tell. She could only imagine that after having had its way, after having deprived this young male of his essence, that the revenant couldn't bear to destroy him. Even as his vicious, sanguinating fleams slid into place and his eyes shone with that telltale glimmer of impending violence, he remained beautiful. Ramona shook her head and swiftly leveled her weapon. She sighed. The universe of the paradox is definitely going to be a less beautiful place without him. She discharged her projectile weapon, and 3 rounds ripped through the guide, forming a straight line from his throat to his heart to his viscera. His eyes were round with shock as a pink gelatinous foam spewed from the entry and exit wounds, each teeming with tiny, desperately clawing creatures resembling some grotesque aberration of the order Rodentia. The group he was leading didn't have to be told. They took off in the opposite direction, screaming as his entire body began to brew and bubble, with the rat-like creatures clawing and tearing at each other, trying to escape the corpse that had spawned them. Even the 2 orphans he had embedded with the group, pretending to be other partiers, fled the scene. However, the basement full of orphans who had been bilked out of their promised meal were in no mood for retreat. They pushed up the stairwell in a howling wave, tumbling upward into the alley. The guide's quickly decomposing, then evaporating body was less than an afterthought to them as they pushed past Ramona, straining to recover their fleeing meal. Dressed in the Renfield red uniform, Eugene and his well-trained team of 6 officers had already arrived, blocking the path from the alley, effectively eliminating any route to their intended prey or escape. While the orphans were occupied with Eugene, Ramona blocked off the stairwell, which represented their only means of easy retreat. The orphans went on the attack, shifting in the same manner that their revenant progenitors did, fleams dropping into place, hands becoming gnarled and nail beds sprouting ferocious talons, their faces contorted into grotesque masks resembling the rats and other vermin they had been constrained to consume in order to survive. Ramona imagined that to paradoxes, they might have been fearsome to behold, but to a seasoned Renfield enforcement team, they were merely a rowdy inconvenience. No projectile weapons would be employed in the close-in fracas. The Renfield officers unsheathed their bladed weapons and readied themselves to do what it was that they were bred and paid handsomely to do. Thank you very much for this opportunity to read this afternoon. This is the first book of Ramona. The second book of Ramona will be launching in September and available for purchase October, Halloween.